Off in the middle of the last story. This is part 3. I was interrupted by my guinea pig, which I'll upload a video of what she was doing, if you're curious. The elder promptly answered, "Be careful not to judge others, because our brother is a pious one. When the monastery has visitors, he pretends to be a fool for Christ, so God will reward him." The elder's answer calmed the visitors down. His kind heart was gradually embracing and protecting everybody, in the same way God tactfully covers up all our sins, so they will not be exposed to the rest of the world. While he was at Philokalia monastery, he used to visit Father Cyril in his skeet and seek his advice on various subjects. Father Cyril, with the help of God's grace, had greatly assisted the elder. Very often, he used to give solutions to his problems before the elder had even had the chance to discuss them with him. He was almost always informed by God of his arrival, and had the answers ready. Sometimes he even found the answer in one of his books, and had underlined it to show Father Paisios upon his arrival. That reminds me of Way of the Pilgrim, in the vision dream, when he underlined things for the pilgrim. In the Philokalia, you know the book. I don't want to mess up the word. The elder expressed his admiration, and after asking for his blessing, he left full of joy and spiritual profit. In 1958, the elder was asked to leave Mount Athos and go to Stomio in Konitsa, to assist with the protection of the area against Protestant proselytism. As he felt that this was truly God's will, he left for Stomio, where he stayed at the monastery of the Nativity of the Holy Theotokos. With the help of God's grace, he offered assistance to many people. In 1962, for spiritual reasons, he departed for Sinai, where he stayed at the cell of Saints Galatian, or Tion, and Epitsimi, and spiritually nurtured many people in the area. The Bedouins loved him very much. He used to work many hours during the day carving wooden articles. After selling them, he bought food and gave it to them. In 1964, he left Sinai and returned to Mount Athos, where he settled down at the skeet of Ivorin at the Archangel's cell. In 1966, he fell ill and was hospitalized for a few months in Papani Kolau Hospital in Thessaloniki. He was operated on, and a large section of his lungs was removed. At this point, I would like to describe how God's providence led Father Paisios to become acquainted with the nuns of the convent of St. John the Theologian. The elder was in great need of blood for his surgery. He had no relatives by his side, as he himself wished, and a group of novice nuns donated as much blood as he needed. He was very grateful for their support. Wishing to express his deep gratitude, he used to say that their kind support resembled a wooden sweater embracing his bare flesh. He wished to take it off and offer it to them in return as an expression of his heartfelt gratitude. He sympathized with the nuns, who were facing insuperable problems in their effort to build their convent. So he personally took the initiative to find a suitable area for its construction. He offered his assistance in every way he could, along with the building's foundations. He also laid his spiritual foundations by giving instructions for the proper functioning of the convent. Thus, the elder established a strong relationship with the convent of St. John the Theologian and remained by its side until his death. By the end of 1967, he went to Philokalia in Mount Athos, where he settled down at the cell of I speak English. I do not know this word. Patos, of Lavra. Living alone in this deserted area, many times he experienced God's presence and consolation, which contributed to his spiritual growth, enabling him to comfort thousands of people in pain. In 1968, Father Paisios went to Stavronikita Monastery, where he assisted in its renovation by offering labor work as well as spiritual advice. In the Holy Cross cell of Stavronikita Monastery, located nearby, lived Father... Would that be Tikhon? Tychon. The ascetic, who was also a spiritual father. Father Tychon was born in 1884 in Novaya Mihailovska of Russia. He was a very gifted man and lived a strict ascetic life. Elder Paisios often visited him for spiritual advice and helped him with the service of divine liturgy by serving as chanter. Quite frequently, the service was interrupted because Father Tychon was in spiritual contemplation, which sometimes lasted half an hour. He saw, as he himself confessed, the orders of the angels, the cherubim and the seraphim glorifying God. Father Tychon tonsured Elder Paisios and gave him the great and angelic schema. When Father Tychon's life was coming to an end, 10 days before he passed away. Oh, I guess it is Tikhon. It's 10 days before he passed away. He asked the elder to stay by his side and take care of him. Paisios served Father Tychon with great self-sacrifice, offering him anything he could to comfort him. Father Tychon used to tell him, "Paisios, our love is precious. My sweet Paisios, our love, my child, will last unto the ages of ages." He asked him to stay in his cell after his death and promised he will visit him every year. Father Tychon fell asleep on September 10th, 1968, 2 days after the celebration of the Nativity of the Holy Theotokos, as he himself had predicted, being well equipped and ready for his journey to eternity. Father Paisios settled down at the cell of the Holy Cross, according to the wish of Father Tychon, where he stayed until 1979. On May 13th, 1979, Father Paisios went to the monastery of Kotlomusio, where he registered as a monk. He settled down at its hermitage, Panagoda, Nativity of the Holy Theotokos, after it was converted into a cell. While living in Panagoda, the elder assisted many troubled souls. All day long, from dawn to sunset, he gave advice to people, consolation and solutions to their problems, took away their sorrow, and filled their souls with faith, hope, and love for God. He dedicated the day to people and the night to God. He managed to rest only during the early morning hours, for 2 to 3 hours, so he would be able to survive through the day's fatigue. During the night, he spent quite some time reading the letters he received by the dozen on a daily basis. The elder was very distressed by the content of the letters and by what the visitors used to tell him. Almost always, people spoke about broken marriages, mental illness, or deaths caused by cancer. Elder Paisios was transformed into a spiritual magnet, drawing out the sorrow of people in grief, the mental fatigue and pain of his visitors, his extremely sensitive soul, his physical exhaustion arising from the many daily visits, as well as his unceasing prayer, contributed to his gradual physical weakness and vulnerability to various illnesses. The illnesses of the elder. The serious problems of the elder's health began in 1966. As mentioned above, Father Paisios suffered from a disease of the respiratory system, which made him very weak. The constant visits of the people, the heavy load of their problems and worries, which he always carried on him as if it were his own, but also the physical fatigue of the hospitality duties resulted in his exhaustion. He had very few hours left to rest during the day, as he dedicated the night to praying. The elder made small icons, using a metallic mold that he himself had carved. He gave these icons, the crucifix, the Holy Theotokos, Saint Arsenius of Cappadocia, to the visitors as a blessing. This task was an additional burden to his already tight schedule, especially when he was using the press that required a lot of physical effort. As a result, he developed hernia. He systematically refused to be operated and tried to invent his own ways to relieve the pain, which were not very successful. He suffered when he was sitting down, but even more so when he was standing up. When I was at the convent of St. John the Theologian in Soroti, I remembered once that he remained standing up for hours, so everybody could come by and take his blessing. He did not sit down, even when he had turned pale and was sweating out of extreme pain. For 5 years, he endured with exemplary perseverance the painful disease of hernia, thus demonstrating in practice the great virtue of patience to both laymen and the clergy. When a group of close friends who were doctors visited him in Soroti, they literally kidnapped him and took him to the hospital to be operated. The last illness of the elder. Since 1988, Father Paisios was facing rectal problems. In 1993, during the period of the Great Lent, he was very weak, as he was fasting strictly. He could not get any rest during the night, due to the unbearable pain and constant bleeding. Although he told the visitors he was very ill, many insisted to see him. He felt so exhausted that he sometimes fainted. Ignoring the poor state of his own health, however, he accepted to see his visitors and relieve them of their grief. When I was at the monastery, I undertook some nursing duties. One day, I went to the elder and told him, "I brought you some vitamins and iron tablets. I believe these will help raise your hematocrit." He answered, "Father, vitamins won't do me any good, as my blood is in very poor condition." Then he added jokingly, "Besides, Father Theoklitos is in need of large amounts of iron, for he is doing some construction work in the monastery. I do not wish to put him in a difficult situation by taking away from him all the iron. As I understand, iron is useless for me. What I really need now is steel." He stood up laughing, took a glass of water, and dropped in an effervescent vitamin tablet, and said, "My experience with medicine is a very negative one, so I do not wish to start taking pills again. I am willing, however, to take one's advice on what to do to protect myself, and I will indeed be very grateful to him." When the iridescent tablet was dissolved, he took again the glass and added laughingly, "Everything will be taken care of once I am buried in the ground." He shook the glass, as if to propose in good health, but instead made the following wish, "Let's all rest in peace, Father." When listening to the elder's words, I knelt by his side and begged him to go to Thessaloniki to have some medical tests done in order to diagnose his disease. The elder asked me to stand up and said, "Listen, Father, my health's condition is a great benefit to my spiritual life, and I do not really wish to alter it. These are the reasons why I do not wish to go to Thessaloniki for medical tests. 1. Christ knows the condition of our health. Since he is the best doctor, we should have trust in him. If it is for our own benefit, he will act accordingly and cure our illness. 2. Since I believe that I have developed a tumor in my intestine, it is best to leave it as it is. Otherwise, if we play around with it, it will get worse. 3. In our days, everybody suffers from 3 things: cancer, mental illness, and divorce. The dozens of letters I receive every week talk about these problems. I do not suffer from any serious mental illnesses," he used to say laughingly. "I have nothing to do with marriages and divorce. At least, let me suffer from cancer, as a consolation to people in distress. Things do not look too good when everyone in the world is in pain and sorrow, and one of us has nothing to worry about. Now, thank God, everything is just fine." 4. God is deeply moved when someone, who has cancer or some other serious problem, does not complain about it, but instead prays for his fellow men. Then one may dare say to Christ, "You see, I am not asking any help for myself, but please do help the others." And God does help. So, my Father, do not worry too much about me. During the Great Lent of 1993, Father Paisios had a tendency to faint due to his low hematocrit. Often, while standing up, he fell unconscious, but he did not despair and faced his illness with great patience, perseverance, and courage. One Sunday, he asked a priest and 2 other monks to come and serve the divine liturgy of Saint Basil the Great. Although he was very weak, he was assisting the priest in the holy altar. As he was standing at his stasidion, which is a church seat, praying, suddenly he developed difficulty in breathing and started trembling. Then he lost his balance and almost fell down unconscious, but unfortunately the monks managed to catch him in time. They lay him on the floor, where he remained unconscious for a few minutes. After a while, he recovered, and they helped him get back to the seat. When they tried to lower the stasidion, so he could sit, he refused to do so. He was standing up during the whole service, even though his face was as pale as a pure candle. He was distressed because his health condition did not permit him to receive Holy Communion. After a while, he fainted again. When he recovered, they forced him to go and lie down, but he refused. Not only did he not lie down, but he also refused to stand at the stasidion, and he continued to stand up. In a little while, he went to prepare the Zion, and for a 3rd time he fainted. When he recovered, he asked, "Is the Zion ready?" Completely disregarding the incident. He decided not to receive Holy Communion, as he was afraid he might vomit. When the service was over, the monks sat in the small guest room to have a sweet, and Father Paisios, as usually, went to his cell to light up the oil candle. He stood on a stool because the oil candle was high up. The next thing they heard was, "O Virgin Mary," followed by a loud noise. They were frightened and ran inside to see what was going on. They found him lying on the floor unconscious. When he recovered, he told them to leave. They said, "Father Paisios, how can you stay alone after having fainted so many times?" He answered, "There's nothing to worry about. Go now, I feel better." The monks obeyed and left, being very concerned about his well-being. This situation went on until October 1993. He had constant hemorrhages, fainting, a tendency to vomit. In addition, the pain in the intestine, which made him difficult to sit down. In October 22, November 5th according to the new calendar, was his last day on Mount Athos. He left and went to the convent of St. John the Theologian in Soroti to be present at the vigil service of November 20th, performed in honor of St. Arsenios. He stayed at the convent for a few days, as he always used to do. When he was ready to depart from Mount Athos, the doctors diagnosed the presence of a tumor the size of a small orange in the last septum of the rectum. They decided he should undergo radiation therapy to reduce its size and then be operated. The CT scan confirmed the metastasis of cancer in the liver and lungs. Despite these findings, the operation was considered necessary in order to prevent the total obstruction of the intestine by the existing tumor. Around 1:30 p.m., when the operation was completed, the elder was taken to the intensive care unit. Only very few people were allowed to visit them. We remained by his side until he regained consciousness. He opened his eyes for a short while, then fell asleep again. Finally, he woke up. I asked him, "How do you feel?" He answered, trying to smile, "Don't you see? Like an astronaut!" He had an oxygen mask on his face, intravenous serum in his 2 arms, the wires of the electrocardiograph on his chest, and nasal gastric catheter in his nose, a urinary bladder catheter, and a special converter for the measurement of the partial oxygen pressure. With great effort, he continued, "I was also given a medal," and he pointed to his chest where the wire of the cardiograph had been installed. "But I don't really know the rank I was given. Am I a colonel or a general?" Then he turned to an old friend, a doctor, who had been greatly benefited by the elder, and asked him, "Costa, what did they finally find inside of me? Are there any metastasis, as the tomography indicated?" "Yes, father," the doctor answered. "The liver as well as the lungs have been affected." "I don't mind. where the metastases are, as long as this remains clean, and he pointed to his head. He had a short discussion with the doctor, and when he left, I stayed alone with him. Among other things he told me, honestly, my father, if the hemorrhages could just stop for a couple of hours, so I could be present at the service of the Divine Liturgy, I wouldn't be bothered at all. By the way, I just recalled that I had asked God to make me suffer from cancer. I had some personal problems that Father Paisios knew about. I was deeply moved by the fact that in spite of his post-operative condition and unbearable pain, he tried to find solutions to my problems. He did the very same thing for everyone else, disregarding the state of his very poor health. One could feel the sincere love he felt for all. Many people were distressed because they could not visit him at the hospital. Reason was not because the elder wanted his peace and quietness, or that he did not wish to see his visitors. Being a monk, he was a very sensitive and discreet soul, and he did not want to accept people's consolation and comfort while the patients next to him had no one by their side. Moreover, he did not wish to disturb the hospital's daily routine, as some doctors disliked the coming and going of many visitors. He used to say to those who informed him that someone is waiting to see him outside, "Visits are of no use to the patient. Peace and quietness are." He remained at the hospital for 10 days, and then was transferred to the convent of St. John the Theologian for recovery. In the meantime, the doctors informed him that the prognosis was not so good, and his lifespan was not more than 4 months. When the elder heard about it, he said smiling, "Do I have to wait that long? Can't it be earlier than this?" He suffered from acute pain, which at times was getting unbearable. He endured with exemplary patience and joy the terrible pain, thinking, as he used to say, of the martyrdom of the holy martyrs suffered for the love of Christ, while he suffered only in order to recover. Father Paisios had irrevocably decided to return to Mount Athos. He set his departure for Monday, June 13th. Meanwhile, he developed high fever with difficulty in breathing, and was forced to cancel his trip. His health condition was gradually deteriorating. According to a scan, the metastasis now occupied the biggest part of the liver, which was significantly swollen. Every now and then, he had to use an oxygen mask to facilitate his breathing. As time went by, his anorexia and difficulty in breathing were steadily increasing, as well as his abdominal pains, which were now becoming more acute and frequent. On top of all this, he periodically developed high temperature and serious tachycardia. His abdominal meteorism created great discomfort, as he could not comfortably lie in bed. During all the stages of his illness, he never ceased repeating that we must be patient, while his very own patience was an excellent example to all of us. Towards the end of June, the doctors informed him that he had about 2 to 3 weeks left. On Monday, July 11th, on Saint Euphemia's day, Father Paisios received Holy Communion for the last time, kneeling in front of his bed. During the last 24 hours, he was very serene, and even though he suffered, he did not complain at all. He did not wish to take any more medication. The only medicine he accepted was cortisone, because, according to the doctors, it would not prolong his lifespan, but would give him some strength. Monday night through Tuesday morning was a real nightmare for the elder. Although he suffered, he was very peaceful, and the only words his lips uttered was, "My sweet Virgin Mary." On Tuesday, July 12th, Elder Paisios humbly and peacefully rendered his soul to God, whom he had deeply loved and served since his early childhood. He was buried at the convent of St. John the Theologian in Soroti, Thessaloniki. When the monks, who sincerely loved and respected him, heard the news of his very short lifespan, they expressed the wish to have him return to the monastery and be buried there. Actually, the fathers of Kotlomusio Monastery had started preparing for the purpose the tomb of Patriarch Matthew, where Saint Photios, the fool for Christ, had also been buried according to the patriarch's wish. Regarding this specific subject, the elder had told me the following: Father, please forgive me for what I am about to say, but this is how I really feel. It would be best for my soul if my body were buried in a humble place, even better, if people put soil on it so some of my sins can be forgiven. The elder's decision to remain at the convent of St. John the Theologian was the result of many different factors: his desire to die and be buried in a humble and peaceful place, with no crowds and special honors, his serious health condition, along with the frequent hemorrhages, his difficulty in breathing, which made his transportation to Mount Athos extremely difficult, his own insistence not to use air transportation, and finally, a personal spiritual reason of utmost importance, but yet unknown to us. He wrote down his decision in a small notebook, as well as in verse form. He asked the poem to be written on a plaque and placed by his tomb, in order for everyone to know that it was his own desire to die and be buried at the convent. He also expressed his desire not to have his remains exhumed before the second coming. After Father Paisios' repose, the monastery of Kotlomosu, where he was registered as a monk, asked for this note to be publicized in writing. And that's the biography. I will continue this in part 4. Also, he's not buried on Mount Athos, so you can visit his grave in Greece, which I want to do one day, and maybe you should too.